I told you that carrying unmanaged debt doesn't just, like, drain your bank account? It actually physically alters your immune system.
Yeah, it's terrifying. It really
Where?
is.
Like, you're probably listening to this right now, assuming debt is just a math problem, a number on a screen. Maybe a source of mild anxiety when the end of the month rolls
Came with a
around.
little stress.
Exactly. But the medical data and the behavioral psychology we're looking at today, I mean, they reveal something much darker. Chronic financial stress literally causes your hair to fall out.
Wow.
Yeah, it spikes your blood pressure to dangerous levels, and it disrupts your sleep architecture so severely that your body basically forgets how to repair itself.
It's like you're under constant attack.
Yes, imagine you're trying to run a marathon. You've trained, you're wearing the right shoes, and you're standing there at the starting line. But right before the starting gun goes off, someone straps a heavy backpack full of jagged rocks onto your shoulders.
Oh, that's a brutal image. But it's accurate.
Right. And every single step you take, that invisible weight just pulls you down. It throws off your biomechanics. It exhausts your muscles before you even hit the first mile marker. That suffocating, heavy burden, that is the literal physical reality of navigating life with debt.
It totally alters the way you move through the world.
Yeah.
Both literally and figuratively. When you're carrying that backpack of rocks, you can't look up at the horizon to see where you're going.
Yeah, you're just staring at your feet.
Exactly. You are hyperfixated on the ground right in front of you.
Mm-hmm.
You're just trying to survive the next step, right? The next billing cycle,
Yeah.
the next minimum payment,
Yeah.
the horizon, like your future, your goals, your investments. It basically ceases to exist because your brain is just locked into short-term survival mode.
And, so many of us are running this race with that exact same backpack, just smiling through the pain, hiding it from our friends or family, and honestly, sometimes even from ourselves.
So denial is a huge part of it.
For sure. But today, we smell to synthesize a stack of absolutely fascinating sources.
We've got some great material today.
We really do. We're looking at deep psychological focus group studies conducted by the Red Crescent and the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, which expose the raw human cost of financial burden.
The human element is so important here.
It is, and we're bringing in behavioral economics from platforms like Yomio, plus real-world tactical survival guides from financial platforms like Monly, Active Portfolio, and Uspankasu.
The main intention here is to separate the mechanics of debt from the morality of debt. Because, we're looking at the brutal mathematics, the underlying human psychology, and the real-world application of actually getting out.
Right.
Debt is, at its core, a mathematical equation that we just consistently try to solve using emotional tools, things like shame, fear, and denial. And our goal today is to flip that script entirely.
Because getting out of debt isn't about, manifesting wealth or just hoping for a lottery ticket. It requires a really strategic framework.
Absolutely. Strategy is everything.
Right. So we are going to heavily break down and compare the two absolute heavyweights of debt elimination strategies. The snowball method versus the avalanche method.
The big two.
The big two. We're going to look at the exact behavioral science and the compounding math of both. So by the end of this deep dive, you, the person listening right now, will know exactly which weapon to deploy for your own financial freedom.
But, before we get to the tactics, we really have to understand the battlefield.
Yeah, let's set the stage.
Because if this was just simple math, nobody would be in debt. You just, spend less than you earn, right?
Right, the old spend less, save more advice that never actually works on its own.
Exactly. Because human beings aren't rational calculating machines.
Yeah.
We are deeply emotional creatures. Let's look at that Red Crescent and IFRC study you mentioned, because the physiological response it documented completely reframes how we should look at this whole issue.
Yeah, the methodology of that study is a vital starting point. It was an analysis of focus group discussions conducted among highly vulnerable populations, specifically refugees living under temporary protection in Turkey around late 2020 and early 2021.
Right, and while that specific population was facing extreme systemic hardships, like acute unemployment and the immediate fallout of a global pandemic, what the researchers uncovered about the biological response to debt is a universal human truth.
It applies to everyone.
It really does. The physical toll of debt does not discriminate by income bracket or geography. It hits everyone in the body the same way.
And the physiological symptoms reported in those focus groups were just staggering. We aren't talking about people feeling like a bit down or bummed out.
No, not at all.
Participants reported severe sudden hair loss. They reported chronic insomnia, like the kind where you are staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. with your heart just pounding out of your chest.
The anxiety is physically overwhelming.
Yeah. We're talking about blood pressure spikes and deep, debilitating clinical depression. One participant literally compared being in debt to being a diseased person.
Wow.
I know. Why is the body reacting to a credit card statement the exact same way it reacts to a physical virus?
Well, what's fascinating here is the evolutionary mismatch. Our nervous systems evolved over millions of years to deal with acute physical threats, right?
Like a tiger in the jungle.
Exactly. A predator jumps out of the bushes, your amygdala fires, your adrenal glands flood your system with cortisol and adrenaline, your heart rate skyrockets so you can either run away or fight.
Right, the classic fight or flight response.
Right, and that is a highly adaptive response for a threat that lasts, say, 5 minutes. But your brain cannot distinguish between the existential threat of a predator and the existential threat of a looming eviction or an insurmountable loan.
So the body hits the panic button, but the threat never actually leaves the room.
Precisely. It never leaves. You enter a state of chronic allostatic load, the cortisol levels spike, and because the debt is always there, the cortisol stays elevated for months or even years.
And that just destroys your health.
It does. That constant toxic flood of stress hormones wreaks havoc on your biology. It suppresses your immune system, which is why chronic stress leads to actual physical illness.
Wow.
It disrupts your sleep architecture, preventing you from entering the deep REM cycles necessary for cellular repair. It constricts your blood vessels, leading to the heart palpitations and hypertension noted in the study. Your brain basically perceives a constant life-threatening predator sitting right next to you on the couch 24 hours a day.
That is terrifying. And, the natural human response to a predator you can't defeat is to freeze or to hide.
Which is exactly what people do with their money.
Yes. This aligns perfectly with the behavioral insights from financial cytologist Salah Hafsanan in our sources. He argues that the journey of prolonged debt almost always begins with the ostrich effect, burying your head in the sand.
The classic avoidance.
Yeah, you get that notification on your phone or that envelope in the mail and you just swipe it away. You refuse to open it.
Sanan points out that this avoidance mechanism is driven entirely by shame. Modern society heavily equates net worth with self-worth. People internalize their financial struggles as a profound moral failing.
They think it means they're a bad person.
Exactly. They think, I am in debt, therefore I am a bad, irresponsible person. And shame is a uniquely paralyzing emotion. Guilt might tell you that you made a mistake and should fix it. But shame tells you that you are the mistake.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. Shame doesn't motivate action. It demands isolation. It makes you want to just disappear.
It creates a self-replicating loop, doesn't it? The shame makes you ignore the debt. And because you ignore the debt, the compounding interest makes the balance grow.
Right, it gets worse.
And because the balance grows, the shame intensifies, which leads to even more extreme avoidance. And, this isolation isn't just internal. The IFRC report highlighted a really tragic detail about social withdrawal.
Yeah, the social impact is huge.
People in severe debt begin to actively sever their social ties. They stop hosting friends. They stop visiting family. Culturally, if you have guests over, there is an expectation of hospitality, right? Offering tea, a meal, creating a welcoming environment.
Of course.
If you can't afford the basic ingredients for that hospitality, the shame is so intense that you simply lock your door. You withdraw from society because you're terrified of being exposed.
Which strips away your support network at the exact moment you need it most. We are fundamentally social creatures. Resilience is built in community. But debt builds an invisible wall.
Yeah, it cuts you off.
Sanan's critical insight here is that we have to forcefully separate the mathematics from the morality. Debt is often a systemic issue, right? A result of predatory lending environments, economic downturns, or just a simple lack of financial literacy. It is a behavioral hurdle. It is not an indictment of your soul.
I really love that framing. My immediate reaction to the whole hiding behavior is to compare it to a car engine.
Okay, I like analogies.
Ignoring debt feels exactly like driving down the highway and hearing a terrifying metallic grinding noise coming from under the hood. Instead of pulling over and diagnosing the problem, you just turn the radio up louder. You pretend you didn't hear it.
We've all been there with a weird car noise.
Right. But mechanical failures don't heal themselves. The longer you drive with that noise, the more the engine tears itself apart. What could have been a $50 belt replacement turns into a total catastrophic engine failure. Ignoring the noise literally just guarantees it will be exponentially more expensive to fix.
The engine analogy is highly accurate, especially regarding the compounding damage. Turning up the radio is the exact behavioral equivalent of swiping away the bank notification.
Yeah.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look under the hood of the driver's behavior, not just the car. Why did the driver push the engine past the red line in the first place? Spending is very rarely just a transactional exchange of currency for goods. Spending is a mirror of our emotional state.
So we're talking about the root emotional triggers that caused the debt, outside of obvious emergencies like medical bills.
Exactly. The psychological sources insist we examine the void we are trying to fill. Are you experiencing acute loneliness, so you hit the buy now button online just to get that fleeting artificial dopamine hit when a cardboard box arrives at your door?
The Amazon Prime therapy.
Yes, exactly. Or are you suffering from status anxiety? Spending money, you don't have to project an image of success to peers you don't even really like. Is it the classic retail therapy after a day of being micromanaged at a job that just drains you?
Right.
If we don't excavate and address that root emotional trigger, no tactical debt repayment strategy will save you. You could magically clear your entire debt tomorrow, and if that emotional void remains unaddressed, you will subconsciously recreate the debt within a few years. Sinan calls this mental cleaning. It's an absolute prerequisite for financial cleaning.
Okay, so we acknowledge the emotional void. We recognize that the monster feeds on our shame and relies on our avoidance. The only way to stop an enemy is to scout it, right? We have to drag it out of the dark and put it under a microscope.
Shine a light on it.
Exactly. Our sources lay out a very specific, almost clinical preparation phase for this. The financial platform Money outlines the creation of the Face Reality spreadsheet. And look, I know for a lot of you listening, the mere word spreadsheet induces a mild panic attack, but you cannot fight a ghost. You need physical dimensions.
Precision is the antidote to anxiety. The guide insists you must compile every single liability into one centralized document.
Everything.
Everything. You need the name of the creditor. You need the exact total outstanding balance down to the penny. You need the minimum monthly payment they demand. But the most critical data point of all, the one people most frequently ignore, is the exact annual percentage rate, the APR.
I think we really need to talk about why the APR is so crucial, because people suffer from what behavioral economists call exponential growth bias.
Oh, yes. Our brains hate compound math.
Right. We are very good at understanding linear math. Like, if I put $1 in a jar every day, I have $30 in a month. It's simple. But human brains are notoriously terrible at grasping compounding math.
Absolutely terrible at it.
When people look at a 24% annual interest rate, they think, oh, that's not too bad, it's just a little bit extra. They don't realize how violently that math works against them on a daily compounding basis.
That is the exact trap. High-interest debt is an aggressive financial hemorrhage. Let's say you have a credit card balance. The bank calculates your interest based on your average daily balance. If you're only paying the absolute minimum required payment, the vast majority of that payment is just covering the interest generated that month.
The balance barely goes down.
Barely. The actual principal, the original amount you borrowed, barely moves. The math virtually guarantees you will be trapped in a cycle for years, sometimes decades, eventually paying back double or triple what you originally spent. Writing down that APR next to the balance serves as a profound psychological shock.
It's a wake-up call.
It is. It shifts the brain out of the sluggish ostrich mode and into a state of urgent clarity.
It's the X-ray that finally shows the broken bone. And once you have the X-ray, you have to prep for surgery. Our sources introduce a concept that I find incredibly compelling: the war budget. It's a very aggressive, uncompromising framing.
It is a complete paradigm shift regarding how you view your own money.
Right.
A standard budget is about maintaining balance, right? A little for savings, a little for rent, a little for fun.
The 50-30-20 rule type of thing.
Right. But a war budget is an acknowledgement that balance is currently a luxury you cannot afford. You are in a state of financial emergency. The sources recommend a radical, temporary restructuring of your financial outflow.
How radical.
Well, under normal circumstances, you might allocate 10% or 15% of your income to entertainment and dining out. Under a war budget, that drops to 2%, or ideally 0.
To 0. Wow.
The clothing budget evaporates. You wear what is already in your closet, subscriptions are slashed.
It's ruthless triage. You're basically looking at your expenses and deciding that your future freedom is vastly more important than a momentary convenience today.
Exactly.
To implement this, the sources highlight a tactic from financial expert Özlem Denizman, the 10-second rule. It sounds simple, like almost too simple, but it's deeply rooted in neuroscience.
It acts as an incredibly effective cognitive pattern interrupt.
So you're standing in a store or you're looking at your phone with an item in your digital cart. Your finger is hovering over the buy button. Your amygdala is firing, anticipating the
The
reward.
dopamine is surging.
The 10-second rule forces you to physically pause and step back. You count to 10 and you ask yourself a binary question. Is this a need or is this a want? If you are on a war budget and the item is a want, the answer is a hard no. You close the tab, you walk out of the store.
You walk away.
Yeah. By forcing that 10-second delay, you allow your prefrontal cortex, the logical forward planning part of your brain, to catch up and override the emotional impulse of the amygdala.
And this cognitive discipline cannot be limited to daily microtransactions. It must also be deployed against a much larger, stealthier threat: lifestyle inflation, also known as the hedonic treadmill.
Oh man, let's dive into that because lifestyle inflation is the silent killer of wealth. Let's say you get a 10% raise at work, or you start a side hustle, or you get a tax refund. The natural human tendency is to immediately upgrade your baseline standard of living.
You feel richer, so you act richer.
Right. You lease a slightly nicer car, you move to an apartment with an extra bedroom, you start buying premium groceries. Your lifestyle inflates to entirely consume the new income stream.
And if you are in the war budget phase, lifestyle inflation is fatal to your progress. The war budget dictates that your standard of living must remain frozen or even decrease, regardless of incoming cash flow.
No upgrades allowed.
None. Just because you acquire extra capital does not mean you have permission to expand your lifestyle. Every single extra dollar, every bonus, every side hustle payment needs to be weaponized. It must be fired directly at the liabilities on your face reality spreadsheet.
Let's pause on that because my immediate reaction is to look at the psychology of willpower. Behavioral science tells us that willpower or ego depletion is a finite resource.
It is.
If we enact a war budget where we cut out 100% of our joy, no dinners out, no movies, no new clothes, aren't we just setting up a psychological time bomb? It sounds exactly like a brutal crash diet. You restrict yourself to eating nothing but celery and water for 10 days. You feel miserable, your resentment builds, and eventually your willpower snaps and you eat an entire chocolate cake at midnight.
The rebound effect.
Yeah. If we starve our lives of all financial joy, won't we inevitably rebel against our own budget, binge spend, and end up in a worse position?
This raises a really important question, and it is the exact reason why the preparation phase, the war budget and the spreadsheet, is insufficient on its own. Pure deprivation is rarely sustainable over a multi-year timeline.
You just run out of steam.
You cannot rely on raw willpower. This is precisely why the strategic method you choose to attack the debt is so incredibly vital. You need a system that does not just work mathematically, but actively supports your brain chemistry. We have to engineer a system that manufactures its own motivation. We need to feed the brain's reward center with the dopamine of victory rather than the dopamine of consumption.
And that transition is the perfect entry point into the core of our deep dive. You have mapped the monster. You have enacted the war budget. You have slashed your expenses. You've bypassed lifestyle inflation. And now you have squeezed out some extra cash flow every month above your minimum payments.
You have your ammunition.
You have ammunition, but where do you aim it? This brings us to the ultimate clash of philosophies. We are putting the snowball method in the ring against the avalanche method. And our goal here is to simply and clearly compare these two strategies to help you decide how to get out of debt.
Let's break them down simply.
Let's start with the crowd favorite, the psychological powerhouse, the snowball method.
The snowball method is basically an applied exercise in behavioral psychology. It leverages what researchers call the goal gradient effect, which states that humans are more motivated by how close they are to the finish line than by how far they have come.
Let's break down the exact mechanics. If you choose the snowball method, you take your face reality spreadsheet and you completely ignore the interest rate column. Pretend it doesn't even exist.
Just cover it up.
Yeah. You order your debts strictly from the absolute smallest total balance to the largest total balance. So a $200 medical bill is at the very top, and your $20,000 car loan is at the very bottom.
Now you continue to pay the minimum required payment on every single debt. This is non-negotiable, as it prevents late fees and protects your credit rating.
Right. Keep the minimums flowing, but then you take all of that extra ammunition, every dollar you save from the war budget, every dollar from your side hustle, and you throw it entirely at that smallest debt at the top of the list. You relentlessly attack the smallest target.
Because it is the smallest balance, it requires the least amount of time to destroy. And here's where the mechanical magic happens. The day you make that final payment and the balance hits zero, you experience a massive psychological victory. You cross it off the list.
That feels so good.
It feels amazing. But more importantly, you take the minimum payment you were previously required to pay on that small debt, you add it to your extra war budget ammunition, and you roll all of that combined capital into attacking the next smallest debt on your list.
It's the literal manifestation of a snowball rolling down a hill. It starts small, but as it rolls over each debt, it absorbs the previous minimum payments. It gets heavier, it builds momentum, and it moves faster.
Exactly.
By the time you reach the massive monster debt at the bottom of your list, your monthly payment power has snowballed into a massive financial force, and you crush it.
The reason the snowball method is so wildly successful for so many people is that it engineers quick, frequent dopamine hits. When you are staring at a mountain of debt, the timeline to freedom seems impossibly far away.
It feels hopeless.
But clearing that tiny $200 store card in your first month, that gives you immediate, tangible proof that your sacrifices are working. You feel a sudden surge of agency. You realize, I'm not a victim to this math, I am actively dismantling it. That psychological win provides the necessary fuel to stay on the war budget.
You're basically gamifying your financial recovery. You're leveling up. Okay, so that is the psychological champion, but what is the alternative? Let's bring in the challenger, the avalanche method.
The math champion.
Exactly. If the snowball is about psychology, the avalanche is about cold, hard rationality.
The avalanche method asks you to transcend your emotions and operate as a perfectly rational economic actor.
With the avalanche, you go back to your spreadsheet. This time, you completely ignore the total balances. You order your debts strictly from the highest annual interest rate down to the lowest interest rate.
Rank them by APR.
Right. Just like the snowball, you pay the minimums on everything. But you take all your extra war budget cash and you attack the debt with the highest APR, regardless of how massive the total balance is.
What's fascinating here is the undeniable mathematical superiority of this approach. High-interest debt is a cancer on your wealth. If you have a credit card charging 25% or 30% annually, the daily compounding interest is working furiously against you.
It's draining you dry.
By attacking the highest interest rate first, you are applying a tourniquet to your most severe financial wound. The math is absolute. By using the avalanche method, you will pay less total money to the banking institutions, and you will achieve a net zero balance faster than any other method.
Okay, so we have the theory, psychology versus mathematics, but I really want to see the numbers actually fight. Our sources provided a phenomenal head-to-head comparison using data from the Yomio Behavioral Economics platform.
This is where it gets real.
This case study makes the abstract incredibly concrete, so let's walk through it in detail.
Let's construct the scenario. Imagine an individual carrying a total of $26,700 in unmanaged debt. This is spread across 4 very common liabilities.
Okay, $26,700.
First, they have a high-interest credit card with a $2,000 balance at a punishing 24% APR.
Ouch.
Second, they have a personal loan of $5,500 at an 11% APR. Third, another credit card with a larger $7,200 balance sitting at a 19% APR. And finally, a larger student loan of $12,000, but at a relatively low 6% APR.
Got it.
Their total required minimum monthly payments across all 4 accounts equal $424. Now let's assume through their war budget, they've managed to find an extra $300 a month to throw at the debt, giving them a total monthly firepower of $724.
Okay, $26,700 total debt, $724 a month to fight it. Let's run the avalanche method first, the rational approach.
Right.
They order by interest rate. So they attack the 24% credit card first, then the 19% card, then the 11% loan, and finally the 6% student loan. They throw their $724 at it month after month. According to the Yomio data, here's the result. They will pay a total of $9,940 in interest over the life of the payoff, and they will be completely debt-free in 41 months.
Okay, now, we run the exact same numbers, the exact same $724 monthly firepower, but we apply the snowball method. They ignore the rates and attack the smallest balance first.
So they hit the $2,000 card.
Then the $5,500 loan, then the $7,200 card, and finally the $12,000 loan. The result, they will pay $10,870 in total interest to the banks, and they will be completely debt-free in 43 months.
The data is so striking when you put it side by side.
If we synthesize this, the avalanche method is the clear mathematical victor. By choosing the avalanche over the snowball, this individual saves exactly $930 in pure interest payments, and they reach the finish line 2 full months earlier, 41 months instead of 43.
Saving nearly $1,000 and getting 2 months of your life back, on paper, that seems like a total no-brainer. Like, if I presented this spreadsheet to an alien, they would say, obviously, execute the avalanche protocol.
But the data actually complicates that assumption. When we introduce human behavior, yes, you save $930. But we have to ask the central question of behavioral economics. Will you actually stick with the avalanche method long enough to see those savings?
That is the million-dollar question.
Let's alter the Yomio scenario slightly to illustrate the danger. Imagine that 24% interest rate isn't on a small $2,000 card. Imagine the 24% rate is attached to a massive $15,000 credit card balance, while your other debts are tiny $500 balances at lower rates.
Oh, I see the trap.
If you follow the avalanche, you must attack that $15,000 monster first because it has the highest rate. You are going to be throwing your extra $300 at it month after month, and because the balance is so huge, the needle will barely seem to move.
It'll feel like you're going nowhere.
You could be grinding away on your miserable war budget for 14 or 18 months before you finally kill that first debt. You experience no wins. You cross nothing off your list.
And what happens after 8 months of eating rice and beans and never going out with no tangible feeling of victory? The fatigue sets in. Willpower depletes. You think, this is impossible, I'm suffering for nothing. You abandon the war budget, you go out and buy a new television on credit, and you are right back where you started. The crash diet fails.
Precisely. For a massive portion of the population, paying that extra $930 in interest over 3.5 years is essentially a motivation tax. It is a highly rational, worthwhile fee that you pay to the bank to ensure you actually finish the marathon.
Oh, a motivation tax. I love that.
Because the snowball method guarantees those early milestones. In the Yomio example, the smallest debt was $2,000. With $724 a month, you crush that debt completely in less than 3 months. Boom, dopamine hit.
You cross it out.
One enemy entirely defeated, only 3 left.
Mm.
You feel unstoppable, which sustains your discipline for the remaining 40 months.
So, if I can use an analogy here, using the avalanche method is like forcing yourself to sit down and eat a massive plate of boiled, unseasoned vegetables before you are allowed to touch the rest of your dinner.
Okay, yeah.
Objectively, a nutritionist would tell you it is the most mathematically optimal, healthy thing for your body. But the snowball method is like allowing yourself to eat a delicious, high-calorie appetizer first. It might not be the mathematically optimal calorie distribution, but it makes you genuinely happy, it keeps you engaged with the meal, and crucially, it keeps you sitting at the table to finish the rest of the dinner instead of getting frustrated, walking away, and going to a fast food drive-thru.
That perfectly captures the tension between rational economic theory and practical behavioral science. The appetizer keeps you engaged with the difficult process. The best financial plan is never the one that looks prettiest on the spreadsheet. It is the one you can actually execute to completion.
So we need to deliver a clear verdict for the listener. How do they choose? Let's give it to them simply.
We advise you to perform a brutally honest self-assessment of your own psychology. If you are a hyper-rational individual, if looking at a spreadsheet and seeing the bank extract an extra $930 in interest from you makes you physically angry, and you possess the ironclad discipline to grind for a year without a psychological reward, then absolutely execute the avalanche. It is the superior mathematical path.
But if you are, like the vast majority of us, if you have tried to budget before and failed, if you struggle with maintaining long-term motivation, or if you look at your face reality spreadsheet and see several tiny annoying little debts like a $100 medical copay or a $250 store card that you could utterly obliterate in a single month, use the snowball. The psychological momentum it generates is profound.
I will add one vital caveat drawn from the financial experts in our sources. You must look at the spread of your interest rates. If your rates are wildly divergent, for example, you have a predatory payday loan charging 400% APR alongside a 5% student loan, the motivation tax of the snowball method becomes catastrophically expensive.
Yeah, you can't ignore 400%.
In cases of extreme predatory high-interest debt, the avalanche method becomes a sheer matter of survival to stop the bleeding. But if your interest rates are relatively clustered together, say within 5% to 10% of each other, the snowball's behavioral advantage almost always results in a higher success rate in the real world.
Okay, so the foundation is set. You have chosen your weapon. You are either rolling the snowball or calling down the avalanche. You are making your payments. But the timeline still feels daunting. How do we compress time? Are there cheat codes to get to zero faster?
There are.
This leads us to the tactics of turbocharging your strategy: negotiation and real-world hustle.
This is where you transition from being a passive victim of the system to an active, aggressive combatant. The Monthly Survival Guide provides some incredibly empowering behind-the-scenes insights into the art of negotiation.
This part of the research completely changed my perspective. The great secret is that creditors actually want to make a deal with you.
They do.
We're so conditioned to view banks as these monolithic, impenetrable fortresses that dictate the terms of our lives. But you have to look at the microeconomics of a collections department. If you are severely struggling, the bank knows that if you completely default or declare bankruptcy, they get absolutely zero.
Nothing.
Furthermore, banks often sell old debt to third-party collection agencies for pennies on the dollar. So if you can offer them actual cash right now, you possess significant leverage.
You do possess leverage, but it requires a structured, strategic approach. You cannot just call the customer service line and complain about your hardship. The playbook dictates that you call the specific retention or collections department and you negotiate from a position of intent.
Give us an example.
For example, if you have managed to scrape together a lump sum of cash, perhaps by selling a vehicle, liquidating an asset, or borrowing from family, you can offer direct settlement. You can legitimately ask for a 30% to 50% discount on the total outstanding balance in exchange for a one-time immediate wire transfer to clear the account.
Let's role play that because it sounds crazy to most people. You are telling me I can call the bank and say, look, I owe you $10,000. I am on the verge of default, but I have $5,500 in cash right now. If you accept this today as payment in full, I will wire it immediately. Otherwise, take your chances on me paying you back over the next 5 years or not at all. And they might actually agree.
It happens every single day, especially if the debt has already been charged off or sent to collections. The agent on the phone has a matrix of what they are allowed to accept to close the file.
That's wild.
But even if you do not possess a lump sum, you can aggressively negotiate the ongoing terms. You can request a hardship program where they temporarily freeze the compounding interest, ensuring your monthly payments are actually destroying the principal rather than just treading water. You can negotiate to restructure the debt into a fixed-term installment plan with a lower blended rate.
There was a highly specific, vital detail in the sources regarding your credit score. In many international systems, like the local credit bureau records, negotiating a settlement can be a double-edged sword.
Yes, the credit reporting mechanism. When you force the bank to take a loss by settling for less than the full amount, they will frequently report the account to the credit bureaus as settled for less than full balance.
Which is bad.
It acts as a severe black mark on your credit report for years, warning future lenders that you did not honor the original contract. The advanced tactic here is pay for delete. You make the favorable reporting of the account a strict condition of your payment. You state, I will pay this agreed $5,500 settlement, but only if you agree in writing to report this account to the credit bureaus as paid in full or remove the negative history entirely.
And the absolute non-negotiable golden rule that every single source emphasized: always get the agreement in writing before you transfer a single dime.
Never, ever skip that step.
Do not ever trust a verbal assurance from a collections agent over the phone. Their goal is to extract payment. Demand they email or mail you the official settlement offer detailing exactly the dollar amount required and exactly how they will report it to the credit bureaus. Only when that PDF is in your inbox do you authorize the payment.
That protects you from phantom debt resurfacing years later. Now, another turbocharging tactic frequently heavily marketed to consumers is debt consolidation. This is the process of taking out one massive new loan to pay off a multitude of smaller existing debts.
The commercials for those are everywhere.
The marketing pitch is very seductive. Simplify your life, make one easy monthly payment instead of 5 stressful ones.
But the sources issue a massive warning label here. Consolidation feels like a trap.
It is a profound psychological trap, if not executed with surgical discipline. Mathematically, consolidation is only a valid strategy if you are engaging in interest rate arbitrage.
Meaning?
You are trading high-interest debt for lower-interest debt. For instance, if you secure a personal consolidation loan at an 8% annual rate and use it to instantly wipe out 3 credit cards charging 24% annual rates, that is a strategic victory. You have dramatically reduced the speed at which the compounding monster grows.
But here is the behavioral pitfall. I have watched friends fall into this exact trap. They get the consolidation loan, the bank pays off their credit cards, they log into their banking app, and suddenly their credit card balances are at zero.
The illusion of success.
Yes. They feel this massive, euphoric sense of relief. They feel like they've won. But they haven't actually paid off any debt. They just moved the rocks from 5 small backpacks into 1 giant backpack. And crucially, because they bypassed the hard work of the war budget, they never fixed the root emotional spending triggers we discussed earlier.
Exactly. They feel the artificial relief of the zero balance. 6 months later, an emergency pops up or they want to go on vacation, and they look at those empty credit cards with all that available limit. They start swiping again.
And then what happened?
Within 18 months, they are still paying off the massive consolidation loan, and their credit cards are maxed out again. They've literally doubled their debt load.
Which is why the ironclad rule from the experts is if you choose to consolidate, the very second those credit cards hit zero, you must physically destroy them. You cut them up with scissors, you call the bank and lower the limit to zero, or you close the accounts entirely.
You have to sever the temptation.
If you do not sever your access to the credit, consolidation is just a mechanism for financial suicide. It is a mathematical tool to lower interest. It is absolutely not a cure for behavior.
To illustrate what the actual cure looks like, the research from Finance Mecca provided case studies of everyday individuals who fought their way out using these exact strategies. These aren't abstract theories. This is application in the trenches.
Let's talk about Emre. His story is the perfect example of turbocharging the snowball. Emre woke up one day and realized his compounding credit card debt had ballooned to 75,000 units of currency. He looked at his face reality spreadsheet, looked at his day job salary, and realized that even with a brutal war budget, the math simply didn't work. The timeline was too long.
So he had to change the equation.
So what did he do? He increased his firepower. Emre was a graphic designer, so he started leveraging his skills on the freelance market. He began working grueling night shifts and weekends, designing logos and websites for international clients.
This is the concept of increasing the shovel size. If you're stuck in a deep hole, you can either try to dig faster with a small shovel, which is budgeting, or you can go acquire a massive backhoe, which is increasing your income. Emre got the backhoe.
But the key to Emre's success wasn't just earning the money. It was how he deployed it. He didn't use his freelance income to inflate his lifestyle. He lived his normal, day-to-day life strictly on his day job salary. He took every single cent of his freelance income, thousands extra a month, and treated it as pure, unadulterated ammunition for his snowball.
Incredible discipline.
He fired it relentlessly at the debt. By combining the war budget on his primary income with the brute force of his secondary income, he obliterated $75,000 in debt in just 18 months.
And then we contrast that with Zainab's story, which highlights the sheer power of microeconomics and tracking. Zainab is a widow with 3 children, facing a crushing debt of $60,000. She did not have a high-paying skill like graphic design to leverage into a lucrative freelance gig. Her backpack of rocks was incredibly heavy.
But she refused to freeze. She applied the war budget with relentless, almost militant discipline. She looked at what resources she did have. She knew how to cook traditional meals exceptionally well, so she started a hyper-local microbusiness, cooking meals in her own kitchen and selling them to office workers in her neighborhood. She also took on local cleaning jobs.
The microeconomics of a cooking business are fascinating. She had to carefully calculate the exact cost of ingredients, the gas for a stove or packaging, and price the meals to ensure a genuine profit margin that she could weaponize against the debt. But her true superpower, according to the case study, was her data tracking.
Oh yeah, she tracked every single expense down to the penny every single day. She treated her household finances like the accounting department of a major corporation. She reviewed her progress weekly.
It's treating your life like a business.
It took her 4 long, grinding years, 4 years of the snowball method, but she steadily, methodically paid off the entire $60,000. And the beautiful epilogue to her story is that the discipline and the customer base she built during those 4 years allowed her to eventually open her own small brick-and-mortar bakery.
What Zainab's story demonstrates is the unstoppable force of compounding consistency. When you are standing at day one of a 4-year war budget, 4 years feels like an absolute eternity. The psychological mountain seems unscalable.
You just want to give up before you start.
But here is the profound truth. Those 4 years are going to pass anyway. Time does not stop. You will either arrive at that date 4 years from now entirely debt-free, possessing the discipline to run your own business, or you will arrive at that exact same date with your debt having doubled due to compounding interest. The destination you arrive at is decided entirely by the daily habit of tracking and payment.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Stories like Emre's and Zainab's completely shatter the illusion that debt is a permanent life sentence or an unfixable character flaw. They prove the central thesis of our deep dive. Debt is simply a math equation that got out of balance, and it is an equation that can be systematically solved through a combination of radical discipline, temporary lifestyle deflation, extra income generation, and the right strategic algorithm, whether you choose the psychological momentum of the snowball or the mathematical efficiency of the avalanche.
It completely demystifies the monster. It proves the monster bleeds, and it proves it can be beaten. But, as we transition into the final phase of our analysis, we must acknowledge a critical reality. Beating the monster is only half the battle. Surviving the peace is often much harder.
That is a phenomenal transition into our final act, life after debt.
Yeah.
Building the moat. Let's fast forward in time. You did it. The snowball absorbed every liability, or the avalanche crushed the mountain. You open your face reality spreadsheet, and the balance column reads 0. You've taken the heavy backpack off. You celebrate, right? You pop the champagne.
You absolutely celebrate the victory, but you must simultaneously enter a state of extreme vigilance. The psychological danger of the clean slate is profound.
Wait, really? Why is a clean slate dangerous? Isn't that the whole point?
If you reach a zero balance through pure brute force, like an inheritance or a lucky windfall, or even a grueling war budget, but you have not fundamentally altered your identity and your emotional relationship with consumption, the clean slate is a trap.
How so?
Your subconscious views the zero balance, not as freedom, but as newly available capacity. You look at your credit cards and think, I have zero balance. I can finally afford to take that vacation I've been denying myself. I deserve a reward. And the moment you swipe that card for a reward, the cycle restarts. The monster comes back to life.
So how do we fortify our position? How do we build a structure so robust that we never ever end up back at the starting line? The experts at Active Portfolio lay out the definitive blueprint for post-debt wealth building. And the absolute first brick in that fortress is constructing what they call the moat. We are talking about the emergency fund.
An emergency fund is the ultimate shock absorber for the unpredictability of life. If we look at the data on why people fall into severe debt, it is rarely due to a single wild shopping spree in Las Vegas. It is almost always a cascade of unexpected events.
Life just happens.
Exactly. It is a blown card transmission that costs thousands to fix so you can get to work.
Yeah.
It is a sudden medical emergency. It is a corporate downsizing that leaves you unemployed for 4 months. Life is inherently volatile. If you do not possess a buffer of highly liquid cash sitting there to absorb that kinetic shock, the shock transfers directly onto your high-interest credit card.
So how wide and deep does this moat need to be? The consensus among the sources is that your emergency fund must contain enough liquid cash to cover anywhere from 6 to 12 months of your absolute basic, bare-bones living expenses. We aren't talking about replacing your full income to fund vacations. We are talking about keeping the lights on, buying groceries, and paying the mortgage.
In the specific economic context provided in the Turkish examples, for an average household, that translates to roughly $50,000 to $150,000 in local currencies sitting in cash.
And the architecture of where you store this fund is critical to its survival. The financial experts at İş Bankası offer a vital piece of behavioral advice regarding account placement. You must keep this emergency fund in a structurally inconvenient location. Do not keep it in the primary checking account linked to your daily debit card.
No, never.
Because if you see it, you'll spend it.
Precisely. If you log into your banking app to check your balance before buying dinner and you see a massive sum sitting there, your brain experiences a false sense of immense wealth. You will begin to subconsciously redefine what constitutes an emergency.
Suddenly, a flight to a concert is an emergency.
Right. A massive discount on a new television feels like an emergency you must capitalize on. You must introduce friction. Put the emergency fund in a separate high-yield savings account, ideally at an entirely different banking institution. Do not install that bank's app on your phone. Make it so that accessing the funds requires logging in on a desktop computer and initiating a transfer that takes 48 hours to clear.
So it takes effort to get to it.
The money needs to be liquid enough to pay the mechanic for the transmission, but inconvenient enough that you cannot impulsively use it to fund a weekend getaway.
You literally have to design a system to protect your wealth from your own worst impulses. I love that. So the moat is built. You are protected from disaster. How do we shift from playing defense to playing offense? We have to adopt the ultimate non-negotiable golden rule of personal finance, which is pay yourself first.
This specific cognitive shift is the dividing line between those who build generational wealth and those who merely survive. Let's look at the default behavior of the average consumer. The paycheck hits their account. They immediately pay their landlord. They pay the utility companies. They pay the grocery store. They pay the entertainment streaming services.
They give it all away.
They distribute their wealth to everyone else's corporations. And then, whatever tiny negligible scraps are left over at the end of the month, they declare as savings.
But Parkinson's law dictates that expenses will always rise to meet income. Human nature guarantees there will rarely be anything left.
It's exactly. Paying yourself first radically reverses the flow of capital. The very second your income hits your checking account, before you pay a single bill, before you buy a single cup of coffee, you automate a transfer. You route a predetermined percentage, 10%, 20%, 30%, whatever your new budget allows now that you have no debt payments, directly into your investment or savings accounts. You make this process entirely invisible and automatic. You force yourself to live on the remainder.
You treat your own future self as your most important non-negotiable creditor. You owe yourself that money before anyone else gets a cut. And once the moat is built, where does that pay yourself first capital go? It is deployed into the endgame, transitioning to passive income. This is where you truly win the game.
Passive income is the ultimate objective of all financial planning. It is arriving at the mathematical inflection point where your capital is working harder than your physical labor. Let's think back to your time in debt. Compounding interest was your greatest enemy. It was a tireless, invisible machine working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year to extract wealth from you and make the banks richer.
But when you get out of debt and start investing, you capture that exact same machine.
You flip the script. You deploy your capital into assets, whether that is a diversified portfolio of index funds, dividend-paying equities, cash-flowing real estate, or even digital products and businesses. Now, compounding interest is working 24 hours a day for you. It is generating wealth while you sleep. The definition of true financial freedom, as outlined by Active Portfeuille, is not about having millions of dollars to buy yachts. It is the exact mathematical moment when the passive income generated by your investments is equal to or greater than your basic monthly living expenses.
Because at that exact moment, your time belongs entirely to you. You don't have to work to survive. Working becomes a choice. You can volunteer. You can start a passion project. You can spend time with your family. Your investments are paying for your existence.
That is the horizon we should all be fiercely navigating toward. The journey from the crushing weight of the backpack to the absolute freedom of passive income.
So what does this all mean? Let's bring everything we've discussed together and crystallize the journey for the listener. We started by confronting the brutal physical reality of the monster. We learned that unmanaged debt is not just a math problem. It is an emotional and physiological disease that thrives in the darkness of avoidance. It feeds on your shame and isolates you from your community.
We learned that the very first step of resistance is dragging that monster into the harsh light of reality by constructing a meticulous, uncompromising face reality spreadsheet, documenting every balance and every APR. Then we prepare the battlefield by establishing a temporary war budget, utilizing cognitive tools like the 10-second rule to interrupt emotional spending and fiercely guarding against lifestyle inflation.
Then we faced the ultimate strategic choice. We simply compared the two biggest methods. We looked at the snowball method, which optimizes for human psychology and dopamine by attacking the smallest balances first to engineer momentum. And we compared it against the avalanche method, which optimizes for pure mathematics by attacking the highest interest rates first to stop the compounding bleed.
Both have their place.
We advise that you must choose the weapon that fits your own behavioral tendencies, knowing that a mathematically imperfect plan that you actually finish is infinitely superior to a perfect plan you abandon after a month.
We explore the advanced tactics to compress time, learning how to aggressively negotiate lump sum settlements with banks, and the severe dangers of debt consolidation, if not paired with behavioral change. We drew inspiration from the trenches, analyzing how people like Emre used side hustles to increase their shovel size, and how Zeynep used relentless tracking in micro-businesses to conquer massive liabilities.
And finally, we mapped out how to survive the peace, how to protect your clean slate by building a 6 to 12-month cash moat in an inconvenient account, and how to automate your wealth by paying yourself first, eventually turning compounding interest into your greatest ally through passive income.
It is a comprehensive, proven roadmap. But as we bring this deep dive to a close, I want to leave you, the listener, with a profound philosophical framing drawn from our psychological research. It is a concept that fundamentally shifts how you view the very nature of your financial struggle.
I'm ready. Lay it on us.
Think deeply about the mechanics of what debt actually is in relation to time. Debt, at its core, is a mechanism that forces you to live your present life in perpetual service to your past.
Oh, wow.
Every single time you make a debt payment, you are taking the finite energy, the precious time, and the physical labor you generated today, and you are using it to pay for something you consumed, experienced, or bought months or even years ago, a vacation you already forgot, a meal you already ate. Debt is a time machine that traps you facing backward.
That is a chilling perspective. You are literally sacrificing today's sweat to pay for a dinner you ate in 2023.
It is the ultimate theft of your present moment. So I want you to ask yourself a question tonight. What would your life look like if all the physical energy, all the crippling anxiety, and all the actual cash you currently spend managing and paying for your past was suddenly freed up to invest entirely in your future? Who is that future version of you? What could that person build with all that capital? What kind of profound peace could that person experience? And most importantly, what is the very first step you're going to take today to start walking toward them?
That is the question to let echo in your mind. It is time to stop running the marathon with that backpack of rocks. You have the blueprint now. You know how to map the monster. You know how to build the budget. And you understand the mechanics of the strategies. All you have to do is look at your spreadsheet, pick your weapon, will it be the snowball or the avalanche, and take that very first swing. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Now, get out there and start rolling.